Sanusi Lamido Sanusi has been at the helm for 4 years. He joins us now for a look at the sustainability of Nigeria's economic development and whether it really is sustainable at this stage. Governor, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon and congratulations, 4 years in office today. So let's perhaps start off with what stands out in particular as a milestone for you in this 4-year career.
Alicia, as you know, when I came in, basically we had huge financial crisis. The banks, about 8 of the banks are about to collapse, 30% of total liabilities, 40% of risk assets. Inflation was at 15.6%, exchange rate was all over the place, and reserves were crashing. The primary responsibility that I was given was to restore financial stability. To fix the banks without depositors basically losing any money, to bring down inflation, which we've done to single digits. Nigerian banks now have capital adequacy of 20%, liquidity ratio of 70%, non-performing loan ratios are down to 5%. We've used AMCON to fix the banks. And we have also found a model, basically, for repayment of AMCON debt without imposing too much of a stress on the system. Exchange rates have been stable for 2 years, reserves are about 50 billion. So in terms of what was the core responsibility of the central bank, which was establishment of financial stability and macro stability, I think the good news is that we are exactly where we wanted to be 4 years ago.
Of course, Governor, this is all part of this effort to create sustainable development in the country. So how are you rating sustainable development at this stage of the game?
Well, if you look at economic policy over the last 4 years, certainly as far as monetary policy is concerned, we've done extremely well. In the last 2 years, since Ngozi came, fiscal policy has moved up a notch. 2012, as I always say, was a fantastic year for fiscal policy. There will be challenges in 2013 and 2014. We know we had big fiscal challenges in 2010, 2011 because of the elections. Where we haven't made much progress, apart from recently on the power reforms, is the structural side. The economy remains highly vulnerable to external shocks, especially around oil price. Oil continues to account for 96 to 97% of our export earnings, and about 80 to 90% of the capital flows into Nigeria basically are portfolio flows. So until we are able to go ahead with the power reforms, with petroleum industry reforms, with agricultural reforms, with other structural reforms, we're not going to get the foreign direct investment that we require. I've heard all these numbers about 13 billion, 16 billion FDI. Frankly, in 2012, foreign direct investment into Nigeria was less than 2 billion. Out of $16 billion in capital flows. So it is about 11 to 12% of total inflows.
Governor,
now,
why these vast discrepancies?
Exactly.
Why these vast discrepancies in terms of figures like that? Because where you have these various figures coming to the fore, what it does is stir up or ignite a whole lot of investor nervousness when it comes to Nigeria and just how stable an economic ground we're looking at.
I mean, well, I have always made it very clear that people need to use terms very clearly and say exactly what they mean. If you mean capital inflows, you say capital inflows. If you mean foreign direct investment, which is long-term, you say FDI. If you conflate the two and say you've had $16 billion in FDI, when in fact 80% of that was portfolio flows in equity and bonds and loans, then you do send wrong signals. And from our perspective, you send signals of long-term stability. What we've done is achieve short-term stability with monetary policy. But short-term stability is only sustainable with the structural reforms that will increase the tenor and the longevity of these investments. The same thing with exports. I mean, if you continue to depend on oil for 96, 97% of export earnings, which is what we have, then you're going to have a big issue if there's an oil price shock. And therefore, while oil price is up, while the market is stable, it's fine. But if you have a shock, then it will basically hit government financing.
Why the challenge to achieving this long-term investment as opposed to short-term investment and stability that we're seeing, Governor, in your books? Is it a matter of us needing to see more refined policy come to the fore, more aggressive reforms in other sectors of the Nigerian economy?
I think in many of the sectors, there's a need for clarity in policy and a clarity in direction. So, for example, if we decide that we want to be an economy that produces for the local market, then we're looking at attracting investments into import substitution. We're looking at building our refineries. Instead of importing petroleum products, we're looking at processing our tomato. We're looking at producing our own starch and ethanol. We're looking at building the agricultural value chain. Now, the clarity in policy and then a set of incentives that will encourage investments in those areas. And these incentives are not necessarily tariffs, because very often we make the mistake of thinking, for example, if you put in 100% tariffs on rice, then you will stimulate local production. You don't. If you're producing 2 metric tons per hectare, and in Eastern Africa, productivity is 6 metric tons, and in Asia, it's 8 to 12 metric tons, then you need to focus on improving productivity. It's about irrigation, it's about high-yield variety of seeds, it's about fertilizers, it's about training, it's about access to markets. So until we begin to focus on improving total factor productivity, using technology and technical and vocational education, we're not going to attract the investment. Also, you've got other issues. You've got whole issues around the cost of doing business, clarity as to where to go when you come in, issues around governance and transparency in the oil sector. All of these issues have to be addressed. Security, to my mind, is not a serious issue. It is a big issue, but it's not the kind of issue that would get in the way. It's in one part of the country, for one, and it will not affect investments even in those parts of the country. Like I say, people invest in Afghanistan, people invest in Iraq. So that is not the biggest issue.
Of course, all of this needing to be done to spur growth in the economy, Governor. In the interim, we've had the Finance Minister advocating lower rates in order to get things going in that regard. But we know that your tenure has been marked by tight monetary policy. Could we be looking forward to a shift in stance in terms of your position in this regard?
Well, I don't have any rigid position. I take decisions based on the monetary conditions at the time of MPC. So we were very clear at the last MPC that we do feel that the fiscal situation in 2013 is a bit more accommodating and loose than in 2012. If you look at the first quarter of 2012, fiscal deficit was 85 billion. Second quarter, it was 235 billion. First quarter of 2013, it was 235 billion. If you look at how much money we basically monetized from FAC and from excess crude between January and April, it was over 2 trillion naira. And then you've got obviously the state of emergency and the possibility. We don't know how long it will last and how much money will be spent. So we felt under the circumstances that the monetary conditions were not tight and it would not make sense to ease. Inflation is down to single digits. Exchange rates are stable. There's some pressure on the output side. In July, we'll look at the monetary conditions, at the fiscal condition, at the exchange rates, at oil price, oil output, and we'll take a decision. But if you ask me, I am likely to say that we are not likely to see an easing of monetary policy in the short term for a number of reasons. You have elections coming up in 2014, and frankly, if you look at what's happening in Nigeria, the election has already started one way or the other. And if that I mean, I know, and I must say that, and we've basically in various MPC meetings commended Ngozi for the amount of work she's done in reining government spending. If she succeeds, in keeping it in check, then that's fine. But if the politicians spend money, then we are more likely to see a tightening, in my view, than an easing.
Governor, very quickly, we know that you've often said that you've seen yourself as a one-term governor. What are we likely to see your next step being?
Frankly, I have decided that I will not start any new major initiatives because I have achieved all the things that I set up for myself. What we need to do now is bed down. The last box to tick for me was AMCON, which has been ticked. What we need to do now is continue to institutionalize it. What we've done with the board strategy sessions and with the bankers committee process is to make sure we have the buy-in of the bank CEOs and the board members at the highest level and the committee of governors into what we've done. I do hope that when I leave, the people that we leave behind will continue to keep the faith and continue to build on what we've started. Now, obviously, the next governor will have to make his own decisions on what area to give priority and what not to. But I do think the broad outline of the need to improve governance and risk management in the banking system, to maintain price and exchange rate stability and build reserve buffers, and basically keep a lookout against a loose fiscal policy, and also things like financial inclusion and lending to the real sector will continue to feature in one way or the other right there in his agenda.
I guess, Governor, let me be blunt. Is politics an option for you, yes or no? Not at the moment, no. I have always said that I'm not a politician. I don't know if I would cope in politics. And I've seen so many people make a mistake late in their lives. I'm a banker. I'm basically a technocrat. I would like to, and my life is that of a public intellectual. I'd like to be involved in an intellectual discourse on the future of the country, the future of Africa, what we can do to improve the lives of our people. But I don't think the kind of politics of standing for elections is the kind of thing that is on the plate at the moment. Well, we'll be keeping an eye on your path as you progress. Thanks so much, Governor, for joining us this afternoon. Nigerian Central Bank Governor Sanusi Lamido Sanusi. Remember, you can email us on powerlunch@abn360.com. After the break, we chat to the Governor of the National Bank of Rwanda. There's more Power Lunch right after this, so don't go away.